In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Robert Frost. Bending, not breaking. Season 6, Episode 11. The Ultimatum. Welcome back to another episode of Bending Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And we are here to talk about The Ultimatum.
The Ultimatum.
Book 3.
Not a big fan of Ultimatums.
I don't like them either. I love this episode.
Great episode. You're right. I agree.
Yeah, ultimatums. That's a great way to push me out of a relationship.
Yeah, not a fan.
If the ultimatum is you or something, I don't care if that something is something as simple as like lobster rolls. I'm picking lobster rolls on
just out of spite.
Man. That's where I land on ultimatums. Anyways, we're here to talk about Legend of Korra, but we've got a special guest joining us today.
Yes, we do.
Ben, who do we have?
Friends, I am so excited to bring you all an encore performance from Trevor Warren. Trevor is a seminarian. He is in seminary, and he is looking to become a minister in some way, shape, or form, looking to do ministry work, and is feeling called to join us today on this podcast to discuss not just a random lens, but the lens of life. Trevor, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm just so happy that you decided to let me back. I mean, that's like the first time anyone has ever done that. So, wow, thank you. I'm just flabbergasted. I'm honored, honestly, to say the least.
Well, we are honored also. Yeah, for those of you who may not remember Trevor's voice, Trevor was on a few of our Dragon Prince episodes. So I invite you back to listen to some of those if you want to get to know Trevor more.
I feel like we've had some Dragon Prince news as of recently.
There's been a lot coming out for the Dragon Prince. It's very exciting. Season 4 is on its way.
Is the Mystery of Erebos different than Season 4, or is that Season 4?
So my understanding is that the Mystery of Erebos is the next segment arc, right? So the first 3 seasons were an arc that I don't know that we had a title for. But
House of the Dragon.
No, wrong show.
What?
But this arc, I think, in Season 4 is a part of it. That is my understanding. I might be completely wrong, but who knows? We'll find out.
Similar to Book 1 and Book 2, Book 3 of like Korra and Atla are separate arcs of the same overall story. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's not the same. But in a way, it is the same.
Let's talk Korra, shall we?
Yeah,
let's jump into it.
Okay, great.
Trevor, you picked the very specific lens of life, and so we're gonna solve it today.
We're gonna solve life.
We're gonna solve life.
Man, I'm glad someone can. I've been working on it for a couple of years, in seminary, but I have yet to see a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm glad to be around some actual people that might know what's going on.
I don't know if that's the case, but there's 3 heads are better than one, and maybe we'll tackle it through. And so, what is life? What is the definition of life? Why life? And what part? What do you, when you think of that lens today, and the way that you're looking through this episode? What comes to mind?
Well, in a sense, when I was like thinking about it, there's a sense in which life is all that we know. It's kind of everything that we know. Like, it may not make like everything, but it's all that we know, and also what we know about it is it's also valuable. We are here, we are alive. We're with others who are alive. We're with people who and also creatures, not just a singular species, but an ecosystem of life. And so, like, when we talk about life, it's very like human centric, but it's also encompasses everything we talk about. And I think the important thing, especially to understand that what we think about life, is that it's a precious thing, and it's a fleeting thing, and therefore it should be like protected and kind of nurtured and nourished to grow and to be full. That's what we think of when we think of life, because that's life's kind of inherent desire. And so don't want to get into the episode or anything, but I just, that theme in this episode just, really resonated with me through that lens.
It's fascinating, like, to think about how vast of a concept it is. And it's I thought about several things, right? Like, what is, I think we could go with a scientific definition. We could go with, there are various cultural definitions of life. There are various spiritual definitions of life. And I think that to narrow life, so to speak, down into any one of those definitions fails to imagine the wholeness of the experience of what life is, which is really like a hard concept to grapple with, because we really, as a human species, love to get that narrowed down to where we know exactly, so we can put it in a box and label it and feel comfortable about it.
We love feeling comfortable.
We do. I think we do love feeling
imagine
comfortable.
how much discomfort we're willing to put other people in to make ourselves comfortable.
This is true. But yeah, again, just going back to these, like, the definitions for me is thinking about, like, okay, for things with bodies, it's like, okay, are you breathing? Okay, are you alive? Then, well, if you're breathing, then you're alive. But what about brain death, when your body is still living but your mind isn't? Or what about all of these various things that distinguish life from what is not life? And so, and is that death? Is death really the opposite of life? Who knows? Fascinating to think about. And then there's the spiritual definition, right? Where it's this. There's a lot of religions and spiritualities and beliefs that believe that assume or presume that life continues post-death, right? And so, I don't know, Trevor, there's a lot here that you've invited us to consider, and I'm interested to take it on. It'll be an interesting conversation.
This episode's going to get real weird. we got so many directions we can go, and I love it. Yeah. Absolutely love it. But before we jump into the episode, Ben, you've got something you have to do.
It's a part of life's world that we're in,
Yep, you've got 30 seconds on the clock to recap this episode. On your mark, get set, go.
Ba Sing Se is in chaos. Mako and Bolin commandeer an airship and save their family. And then they track Korra into the Misty Palms and deliver Zahir's message. And then, they head to Zalfu. And they're like, oh my God, Zalfu, metal bending city. And they're like, we're going to connect with Tenzin. And
halfway there.
Doesn't get to Tenzin. But then Korra does find Iroh. And then, oh my God, look, Zuko. They're connecting over Aang. And then Zahir has arrived at the air temple and it's really bad. And then air peeps are captured. And then Tenzin goes wild with Kaya and Bumi. And Kaya heroes the air peeps to the stables, and Kaya and Bumi almost die.
You always get lucky when you have a fight scene that you get to jump a part of there. So, all right. Well, let's jump straight into it. Let's just go ahead. Trevor, when you think life and you think this episode, what are you thinking? Hey, Trevor, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hey. Sorry, there might have been a little cut there, but we'll jump straight in, and our dog barked a little bit. So.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it was just very silent. I heard like sniffing, and that's all.
All right, and we'll start straight with you. I'll ask the question, kind of the prompt again, and so. All right, when we think about life, Trevor, when you pick this lens in this episode, what's one of the first things you want to talk about?
I don't know, like, I guess for me, the most interesting thing is like what's most relevant for us as people. Like, we can spend all day talking about like the biological complexities of life. We could spend the day talking about like what is the philosophical implications or origins of life. But like ultimately, when we get down to it, it's like, what is gonna be in my day-to-day, what's going to be in my direct experience. And for me, like this idea of us seeing life as valuable, and seeing that as like a lens to be living life, our own lives through, is ultimately a way of making sure that life is able to flourish. And so for me, like that's the starting point. We can talk about all the speculative reasons for why life is and why it continues to grow and flourish, and why it desires to. But ultimately, it's we should be working to preserve life and to maximize life, regardless of if we're able to explain it, or not. Even whenever we're unable to make rational sense of it, being able to recognize that, life is there and it's precious. And I'm ready to live my life as if it has value.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I'm hearing a few claims. One, I'm hearing life is precious and therefore we need to protect it. And with what we have, it is fleeting, and therefore it is even more valuable because it's not going to last very long. So, hearing that there's this expectation of that, the thing in the episode this reminds me of is really going straight to Zahir, right? Let's go to the big question here of holding others hostage in order to accomplish a goal. And it's interesting here because the goal is to make life better, right? Zahir believes that by, taking other people's lives, that it will be for the greater good of everyone else's. And that's a big ethical question. So I'm curious what either you, Sunshine, or Trevor, what's your response here?
Oh, I have no idea.
Dang.
I mean, because when we think about we can objectively say that the Earth Queen was causing harm,
yes,
to lots of people.
Yes,
she had a massive circle of influence, and so you could make the argument that with her no longer being around, that life for those people is going to be a whole lot better.
Although the Earth, Ba Sing Se is in some turmoil right now. So
I mean, you have people who are grabbing, riches and things that
the whole city's burning to the ground.
Yeah. Well, short-term versus long-term wins. I don't know. That's why I said I don't know.
But even within that, when the city's burning, you see those moments with Bolin and Mako going back to get their family, and the grandmother wanting to stay because that's the house she grew them in. That's everything they've ever owned, every physical thing that was theirs is there. And Bolin was like, Grandma, we're being together is what is important. Our life is what is important. Not just that we are alive, but together, we have hope for growing life. And so I think I found that so interesting because in midst of all this chaos, it brings us to this family who is having their own kind of reimagining what's important and what's valuable.
That's an interesting way to reframe that too, because that's not what Bolin says. He's not saying us being alive is better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what he didn't say it that way. He says home is where we are, right? And it's interesting because if you reframe that in terms of how do you frame that in terms of using life in that expectation, right? We are better off when we are living, but it's also we are better off when we have a future together. And in a way, I wonder if life is also this projection of our future, right? If this thing, this potential that you mentioned the word flourishing, this flourishing that we want to achieve for one another is a part of what life is, just as much as this present moment. And I'm wondering if that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if for some reason my mind's going here. I just recently, and I hate to transition to a whole nother series, but the Sandman series that just came out.
Oh, Sunshine loves the Sandman.
I knew nothing about it, and watching it, it was so good. That man was made for that role. He was brought into this world to play the Sandman. Anyway, but there was this emphasis on the human ability to dream and imagine things, and to imagine lives that are beyond where we are now, and but lives that are building upon the lives that we're living and experiencing in the present time, and be able to imagine flourishing lives and be able to dream, us being whole. And how through that being able to dream and that ability to imagine, that's ultimately how they're able to flourish, and that's kind of like this a subtle theme. And so I don't know, that's kind of what made me, I guess that's kind of what I think of, in terms of like why, when we talk about we're alive, especially in like the church being made in the image of God, a lot of people talk about the connection to it being imagination and like our ability to imagine another life, being able to imagine something, going forward. I don't want to say like necessarily more, just because, I don't want to diminish the value of creation now, but like creation is constantly growing and flourishing, and that's like, it demonstrates that in nature. It demonstrates that in our individual experience. We know that life is constantly, flourishing. And that is really due, I think, at least a great deal to our ability to like conceptualize a future, and imagine a future where life is flourishing. And I think a lot of spiritual traditions kind of like tap into that, of what makes us human, what makes us alive, what's that divine spark in us. It's that ability to imagine.
Yeah. I'm super curious about this because there was a moment that I wrote down where I was like, I was questioning the imagination of one of the characters. And so talking about Mako's grandmother, there's a moment in this episode, there are several moments in this episode that I question her judgment, but there's a moment in this episode specifically where...
She's just a product of her time, Ben.
Yeah, yes, and I think that is what shows, and I think our imagination sometimes gets locked into what we assume to be true of other people, right? And so if my imagination of the world is limited to only what I can conceive of what other people would do, and it's not open to difference, it's not open to change, then we're going to make assumptions about other people that can be harmful. For instance, right, when she goes into Asami and assumes that she's the Avatar, you're such a beautiful Avatar, you're so beautiful, and then immediately talks to Korra, and you're very muscly for a woman. And then immediately after that, it's like, hey, Mako, why aren't you dating one of these two? And not only is it awkward because they did, but also it's like we're failing to assume that there are other potential options for these three people. And it's just really interesting to me. I'm curious, Sunshine, I'm curious particular about your response to that. Just I'm curious about the imagination portion there.
Well, it's interesting to me because I think something I see here is if I've grown a home and I have supported my family in this home, and I am acting under the assumption that the only reason that this family is happy is because they have this space to join together that I have provided, then yeah, I don't want to leave that space either, right? Like I want to be there because I think that that's what's contributing to this. And then to hear someone say like, family's where we are, Grandma, and her be like, no, it's not. It's here. It's in this house. And I even mentioned during the episode, every time I watch this and see her grab the picture of the queen, I go, man, when you are stuck in your ways and finding comfort and you feel safe in that comfort, you want to hold on to that with everything. She's grabbing a picture of someone who has literally caused so much harm to her and others in her community.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, that's a form of comfort to her. And that's giving her life. And I'm awestruck. I'm just like, why?
What?
Why?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to understand.
But I kind of like, as much as Bolin can drive us a little bit off the wall this season, the fact that they're like, the house is burning and we're not arguing about this anymore, and he like picks her up, I'm like, that's typically not my move when we're talking to people and encouraging them to do the right thing. And then sometimes you're like, this is unsafe. And
There's
you're not
literal
smoke
you are
making
coming through the
unsafe
door.
situation, and so we're going to move out of this. We're going to have this conversation on an airship, and we'll build you a new home. But it's when you think about if we're thinking about the places that are like, I think this place contributes to the lifeblood of my family, I can imagine why it would be so incredibly difficult to leave that. I say that as never been a homeowner. And so I'm like, get out of the house. Get out. Like, And so maybe I would feel differently in 70 years or in, 50 years after I've raised a family or had a home for so long and it's been my home. Right now I'm in a place of like I'm constantly moving once a year when rent's due. So when rent gets higher. So I don't have a lot of roots planted.
Well, and again, it comes down to that the imagination, right? If I can imagine myself being happy outside of this place, I am more likely to leave, right? If I can imagine myself feeling safe outside of this, if I can imagine a world that is better, different, then I'm going to be more likely to go after it.
Correct.
And so I think sometimes when we limit ourselves by saying, no, this is the only option, then is that really living? And I guess that's an interesting question to pose, right? That's big. That's a big question to pose also. Wow. Okay. What's another moment of life in this episode that somebody wants to lift up?
Yeah, I think for me, one is just the decision of, this person who has tried to kill me before wants me to trade my life over for the lives of 30 people in an entire Air Nation.
So Korra making this decision.
That's so tough.
Yeah.
Because to be fair, it would take a lot of pride to sit there and say, no, my life's worth more than 30 other people's lives.
But also she's the Avatar.
I hear you. But that's a tough thing to weigh.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're putting both on a scale, I don't know where that would tip. You know what I mean?
It's also interesting. Zuko's response was like, Aang would have felt this was really important, but also he knows how important the Avatar is. And so Zuko was like super riding the fence here of being like, both are important.
Yeah. And then she was like, thanks for that really helpful advice. I'm like watching, I was like, he literally told you nothing.
Well, in a way, it's just so interesting. Like, what was she really seeking? And I think oftentimes when we get put into between rock and hard place, we start polling. That's a sign for me that I'm like, oh, I'm living in some indecision. I might have the answer, but I don't like it, and so I'm gonna start polling other people to see if I get a different answer. And this is what's happening right now. And
it's not like that. Like one of the choices, it wasn't like one of the choices is life. And then one of the choices is not life, if you either choose one and you're caring for life, or you're choosing one and doing it for another reason. Kind of like, with like the pro-life and pro-choice debate, as if pro-life and then the other side, pro-death, no one's no one's pro-death, it's pro-choice, you know what I mean? It's that same kind of dynamic. And I think for her, cause it's it's not like, with the Avatar, if she's not the Avatar, and this group is not only trying to kill the Avatar, but for whatever reason she doesn't know yet, that's somehow gonna succeed in they're changing the world order. The circumstances are extremely relevant to life. And it could potentially have a situation where you have just 30 people on one decision, and the other decision, the whole created everything, and so, it's like, what do you choose? And I think part of the problem with that it points to is the tension that's there, and how Zuko's like, that you're right. It's hard, that's both those things are true. You're right. That each one, I feel. So I think we're supposed to feel that tension.
I have a question. I am curious if you all think that Zahir would actually kill off all of the Air Nation.
I don't think he wants to.
I don't think he wants to either.
Because I think back at the moment where they threatened the broadcast announcer in Ba Sing Se.
Yep.
And he's like, no.
These are the people we're trying to help.
Him. We're helping him.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he'd even kill Tenzin, because yes, Tenzin is kind of the patriarch of the Air Nation right now, but he's not a monarch. You know what I mean? And so I don't even know if he wants to do that. He might genuinely be like, it is really.
Is this just a big
It really
bluff?
is a pleasure to meet an Air Nation master. we still have to kill Korra. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's where, like, but am I giving him more grace than he deserves? Maybe.
Maybe.
So
I actually think he would
um,
kill them personally.
I'm not sure.
I actually do.
Really?
Because he's like in this very letting go of the world kind of mode. You know what I mean?
That's
And like in a
so
sense, I think he's
interesting. We know what's happening next episode.
you know, and like and I feel like he's in this kind of spirit of this airbending, you know, philosophy of like detach yourself, think of the bigger, you know, picture, and like, you know, it's important lesson to learn, but he takes it almost to like the extreme of like where nothing, you know, like nothing matters, nothing material matters, you know, I am air.
Because what's at a certain point, it's like, all right, so you're doing this because you think that there's an injustice towards a bunch of people, but you're willing to kill a bunch of people to solve that injustice, and you're just going to keep killing. That's a little bit of a fish hook there of you coming back around. You go far enough one direction and start coming back around.
Well, and I think that's what happens, right? When we have an ethical boundary that we cross, we are much more willing to cross it a second time. And so we lose that integrity. And I think part of this cycle that Zahir is in is exactly what you're saying, Trevor. I really think I'm compelled by your response.
Oh, thank you. I try.
He's losing all. He's no longer tethered to the world. He's no longer attached. That attachment is what allows him to be willing to do things like that.
He's never had a really good lobster roll.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I'm compelled. You've changed
excellent.
my mind. I think
I haven't even had an apologetics class. Look at that.
You know who's living their best life? Milo. Milo's living his best life.
Bowen's not here right now.
That entire conversation is just a pure moment of joy for me. And I love that Korra comes in and says, "This is your commanding officer. Go get your dad." He's like, "Yes, sir." He knows what's up.
That moment the moment you realize, oh wow, this is serious.
It's also like such a child move to be like, I'm not going to listen to anything you say
because
until
he's a child.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's in control. Like he's got the power. And then, you know, Korra's able to speak Milo and make some moves happen, which is, I think, super helpful.
The other thing that I think is worth lifting up is what does life mean when we think about Iroh? And the way that Iroh has been able to continue his legacy into the spirit world. He's currently having an impact on Korra, and so is that living? Is that life? I would say yes.
I don't know that I feel I can answer this question.
I can. It's yes.
Well, okay. Here's my initial response. Trevor, feel free to cut me off. I'm thinking that we need to have multiple definitions of what life can be, right? Because is life attached to body, right? Like, do we need body in order to be alive? And I don't know.
Spirits have corporeal forms in this universe.
I don't know. Like the spirit realm, like I don't think that Iroh can walk out of the spirit realm through the portal.
That might be true.
And be present. And so I don't think that it is the same kind of life that the rest of our characters have.
I mean, he seems to be loving it just fine.
But yeah, that is an interesting question. Trevor, what do you think?
Well, you know, I guess I am technically in a profession that does say it believes in eternal life. So I guess, you know, at risk of people on the ordination boards like listening in, you know, like yes, of course life can exist in the spiritual form. But I think you're kind of right, especially with like reimagining like what we think of life, and I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Like I'm like yes, and from that point it just becomes very like mysticism for me. Kind of in this and kind of in the same way of like, what does it mean to be truly alive? You know, is it just our heart beating and our vitals, you know, being showing signs of life, or is it our consciousness, our ability to perceive the world and to imagine? I'm kind of in the camp where I think it's kind of a paradoxical combination of the two, kind of like, just in the same way, we believe Jesus is both human and divine. And everybody's like, how can you believe him? I was like, I mean, it makes much paradoxical sense than everything else in the universe. And so I think that tension between body and soul kind of remains even in this spirit existence. And so I guess that's where, if it's a non-dualistic spirit, spiritual existence, I would be I would be open to like life can have a different form.
Yeah, it also reminds me of the concept of just because it's in our head doesn't mean it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is I'm not saying this is all happening.
That's a quote from like a famous book, right?
yeah, by a turf. But I think it's an interesting concept to think about in this situation because, even if the spirit world and the interactions with Iroh are solely in Korra, and that's solely a Korra capacity, because she's the Avatar and has access to that, then it doesn't necessarily mean it's not real, right? And so there's this like liminal space that we're trying to define that is undefinable, and I think that's the crux of the problem.
Well, and I might pose the of course philosophical question of, since there is now a doorway, a entrance to directly between the two worlds, is there actually two separate worlds? Because like the spirits are traveling freely, and people can go back and forth. So like, is it so.
Or my favorite version of that paradox is, how many holes are in a straw?
One.
Is it one hole?
One hole.
From both ends? Just straight through?
Yeah, yes.
Some people would argue that it's two.
And they're wrong. It's the same people that argue that a sandwich is a hot dog.
What if
a sandwich, a hot dog is a sandwich?
No, you see, you're already
what if there
is,
but what if there is no straw? Whoa.
Hold on. Listen, if there is no straw, then water is wet. So
what if the straw is really a simulation?
Water is not wet.
Inception.
Other moments of life in this episode that we want to lift up.
I have one that's...
Oh, good. I asked you, so you should say it.
Fairly problematic. I'm concerned about this moment near the end of the episode where Tenzin, we should acknowledge how much of a boss Tenzin is in this episode.
I love the moment where he's like, you don't have a choice, and he's like, yes, I do.
And then
wham! Every time I'm like, that's potent on so many levels. We do have choices. It's not always just one option. And he's really good at fighting.
Yeah. I mean, at one point, he's like successfully taking on 3 of the Red Lotus, who we have seen dominate all the way of this season until now, right? And Tenzin's taking on 3 of them, doing well, and then Pli gets in the way and ruins it for Tenzin. But it's fascinating to me to just honor the mastery of what it means to truly be a master of an airbending master. That's the language I was looking for. But the reason I lift this up is, once Tenzin is defeated, he says, I will never give up, or something along those lines. Not until I take my last breath, or something.
There's still breath in my lungs.
Yeah, as long as there's still breath in my lungs, I'll never give up. And
this won't be over.
Yeah, and Zahir, they are powerful enough to where at this point could have restrained Tenzin.
Well, in this way, he could have done the same thing that he did to the Earth Queen at this point.
He could have killed Tenzin,
right?
Sure, but he also I think this is my point, though. This is this like the sanctity of life conversation here. It is, rather than restraining Tenzin, because they had the capacity to do that, they could have easily restrained him, made it so that he couldn't bend, put him in a position to where that was not an option, and then made it so that he was not having to fight back. But instead, they continue to beat him to a pulp and, venture off screen as they start beating him and torturing him until he is literally beaten to the point of restraint. And so I guess my question is in the why. Why did they choose to beat him senseless instead of restraining him in this moment. And I'm really curious about y'all's thoughts.
I think because it would have to be holistic. It couldn't just be, they were fighting. They were trying to take not just, especially if we're talking about like the paradox that is life. It wouldn't be enough to just, restrain him and like, oh, I'm beat. There is breath in my lungs. No, like to truly dominate him, to truly beat him, to the point where he like realizes it. I feel like they have to, physically do it, and make it body and soul that they are beating, because they know that that's, the to truly take his life, it would require that, to truly make him dead, which, at this point we don't, that's kind of where we're being led to believe, at least.
Yeah, so like going to like taking his, not only defeating him physically, but defeating him like mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Exactly.
As well.
It's like this, it's all happening together, not just beating him, but, beating him.
Yeah. I think this is my problem. This is one of my problems with the Red Lotus, in that there are so many times where I really am like, they have such a good idea. I like it. I like where they're going. And then they do this. And I'm just really upset because this is so outside of what I want the ethics to be for driving for a better world. Yeah. It's that they do things like this that are unethical, entirely unethical.
Well, and I think it goes back to, Zahir with his like untetheredness, in a sense, he's fighting Tenzin saying, let go. Why are you still holding on? What do you like? Look at the rational, like, look at your situation now. There's no hope. You're not going to be able to win. Like, just let go. Like, what are you holding on to? And Tenzin and
let go.
Exactly. Like, why are you holding on to any of this? And Tenzin's saying, like, basically, I'm alive. I'm holding on, because I'm alive, and like that seems to be something you forgot almost, like because Zahir just can't comprehend, why someone would still be standing, despite what the data shows, what the, what's making rational sense. Like he's, not willing to entertain that idea. And Tenzin's just like, you're missing the whole thing. The reason I'm standing is because I am alive. And as long as I'm alive, I'm still going to fight.
Oh, okay. Are there other moments that we want to venture to that we haven't lifted up yet regarding the lens of life?
Kai doesn't die.
Kaya and Boomy don't die.
Kai.
Oh, and Kai.
Yeah.
Kai doesn't die.
Kai lives.
Yeah.
Quite literally. Brought back to life by a pet, and I think there's
and I think it's interesting with Kai, because I feel like this is the first significant time we've seen him like do something so selfless, like being like, I'm gonna go distract them, and here he was like having, when we first met him, was like trying to steal their shit, who was like literally, and like his view of life is like, I have to get by, I just gotta take care of me and like meet my basic needs, because that's the only life I can imagine right now. And here we are seeing him having been in a community and making all these new relationships, being like, you know what, I see what life is really about. I see a new life, and it's a life where, the people I love are able to flourish. And he makes that choice. And
again, I think it comes down to his imagination, what he can see as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And when he was in that state, as you were saying, like, this is the only thing I can do to stay alive, and kind of being alive kind of sucks. So this is it. But when he's living in community with a bunch of people that are bonding and growing and connecting, the imagination shifts to what could be. And I think that allows for greater sense of compassion, a greater sense of kindness, a greater sense of valuing life, not only in yourself, but in others.
Oh, there's so much data out there that supports when you're in community, the positive benefits that it has on so many different facets of the way that you get to navigate the world around you. And so Kai's growing up, and we like to see it.
Yeah. So for me, the kind of takeaway here is, how do we cultivate a greater depth of our imagination? How do we cultivate more hope so that the way that we live better captures what we want life to be?
Yeah.
Right? Is that the question? Is that the right question to ask?
One literal way to do it is to practice gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
We know that.
Yeah.
We know
that's
that
why
to be
we
true,
do it on the
right?
show, for that exact purpose.
Yeah.
And that's not to be like, always look at the bright side and here's a nice little silver lining, but there is data out there that supports that when you spend time, hey, I'm grateful for this today, and you do that every single day, that it slowly changes your outlook and your ability to navigate the world around you, and your ability to be hopeful, and the impact that has. And so that is a very literal way to start that process.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of data around a lot of other practices too. And I think that's honestly what makes religion so appealing, is that for a lot of people,
that's the community.
It creates not just a community, but also it creates a vision of what could be. Right? It gives us like this idea of heaven, so to speak, for Christian believers, is that there's a heaven some way, somehow, somewhere that we can get to or achieve, whether it be here on Earth or in another realm, that is better, and that we can get there, and that there's a way to get there. And I think that is really compelling for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely, as long as we're not dehumanizing others in the process.
Yeah, like gatekeeping heaven, for instance.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, like St. Peter at this pearly gates. No pearly gates. No. Trevor, please speak us down.
No, yeah. No, I totally agree. I think from at least from, my seminary background and Christian background, I might also just add that, and I will say that majority of Christians don't believe this, so I might get called a heretic, God forbid. But like, but there's a sense in also like, the heaven that we can imagine. Even if you look in like scripture with like the end of Revelation, there's this sort of like new heaven and new earth, and so it's not just like a sort of like dualistic, idealistic, aesthetic hope, but this sort of reality that's, in the here and now, that's in the creation as we know it, where people's needs are met, where people are living in community together and flourishing, and having that hope, because you can take a kind of a nihilist of, oh, well, nothing matters, and the happiness is
let go your
earthly tether, happiness, like we just need to figure out how to be happy ourselves, and without any sort of like responsibility to help one another, especially like those on the margins. And so I think I think that being able to imagine is so important, not just like as a separate place, where we go, which is ultimate hope that like heaven and earth will be like, brought together, at least in the Christian tradition, but seeing that heaven is in a sense attainable now. Like we are witnessing the world become heaven, and because the world is good.
It's interesting that I know we've joked "let go your earthly tether" several times in an episode where he has not said that. But
wait, next episode.
Next episode
real.
But we do see the kind of the two bookends of that, like what happens when you numb yourself so much that you're willing to cause harm, and what happens when you are so attached that you are willing to stay in a burning building. So when we're talking about speaking truth to the binary, like let's live in the gray area between those two worlds, right? Like,
yeah, interesting concept for sure.
Life should be in the middle.
Yeah. And I think regardless of anyone's beliefs of who's listening, I think one of the things that I'm taking away, being someone who's not a part of the Christian tradition, is again re-envisioning that like heaven, whatever that may be, let's assume that is just a greater better world that we have the capacity to achieve, for me, it is a practice,
Yes,
not a promise.
absolutely.
Right? It is a practice, not a promise, which means we need to start doing the things that we want in order to achieve the things that we want. We can't, it won't just happen for not doing anything. We have to make it happen. And so for me, I'm hearing, again, just this call to find ways to nurture and cultivate hope, find ways to nurture and cultivate a deeper vision of what is best for the world. And use discernment, because Zahir is clearly trying to do what he thinks is best for the world, but the means of getting there are not necessarily great too. So there's just a lot going on. All right. Well, we have had a really lovely, exhaustive conversation about life, and we solved all of life's problems.
So I don't know if we made a dent in 45 minutes.
Oh, man.
But
Good conversation. Loved it. And
knowing that we can't solve the problems, what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back with our final few segments.
Episode Talking Life with Trevor Warren. We are excited you've been with us, and we are going to jump straight into Twee and Law. What pushed us and what pulled us in and out of this episode?
Super excited.
Yeah. One moment for me that I really loved is Zuko speaking to Korra and saying, "I would love to be counsel for you if you want it." I think so often,
and not assuming,
and
right?
So often we don't voice the things that we really want, whether it's because we think we're gonna jinx it, or we think we're gonna make it not happen, or that we're gonna be off-putting by lifting up the things that we want in life, and so what we end up doing is not setting boundaries or not letting people know what brings us joy so that they can share in that. And I really like this because he just seems so genuine and wholesome in this moment, and says just I was once counsel for Aang, and I would love to be yours. And I think that we don't do that enough, and I don't do that enough. And so I love that moment. That pulls me in.
I love that.
What about for y'all?
Yeah, the thing that pulls me in actually is I'm just enthralled by Tenzin this whole episode.
He's so talented.
He's so talented. It's just the fighting is exceptional. We've talked about this before this season even, but just the choreography, the mastery of and I think this is what's really interesting for me is watching Tenzin and Zahir fight. If Zahir was better than Tenzin, I would have rioted. Right? Because that's just it had to take the others so coming unrealistic.
Right.
And thankfully that was not the case. Tenzin was clearly more effective than three of them combined. And so I was just pulling and getting antsy in my seat and and cheering for Tenzin because get him. So I was it really kept me engaged, and I just really loved that. So I was definitely pulled in by all of that for sure. What about you, Trevor?
Yeah, well, so I was going to say Tenzin, but it's okay. I have a secondary. Definitely Kai. I think, especially kind of after Tenzin, it almost seems like he is emulating Tenzin's selfless example. And also just knowing that this is where Kai has been, the kind of character arc that has happened with him. This is kind of he can finally choose what is right, and finally does. And thankfully isn't lose his life as a result of it, because at the end, he's alive. So, yeah, exactly. Yes, thank goodness they're doing the good thing does work, So I think that's probably what drew me in.
I love it. What about what pushed you away? I'm curious. What was the thing that you were like, I didn't love that.
So definitely Zuko's answer. It's like, and I get that's just probably a me thing because I'm like someone who just like hates like tensions and hates unresolved tensions, of like, and indirect answers. I'm a very like, give me like bullet point 1, 2, and 3 of what I need to do, and just, I need some certainty right now. I didn't go to the spirit world to get advice for this, and so, but I get that that's probably intentional. And I've always been the type of person who's been aware of like, I need to be probably a little more okay with uncertainty, because that's, believe it or not, that's life. So,
yeah, that's life.
So we're talking about life. That's life.
Wow, Sunshine. What about you?
I want to know who's driving the airship. Plee is hanging out in the center so that Plee can keep an eye on everybody down and shoot them with the combustion eye.
Uh-huh.
And the other 3 are fighting. So how is this airship floating exactly where it needs to be so that Plee can potshot kids?
You're right. I didn't even think of that. Wow.
Who's driving it?
I'm just, maybe they threatened somebody along the way to like, if you don't drive this exactly right.
Well, you think they stopped at a gas station and got some pork rinds and then like threw someone into the ship with them?
They're willing to threaten an entire air nation. Maybe they're willing to threaten somebody who can pilot.
Maybe it's like the on Monty Python Quest for Holy Grail when it's like Sir Mr. No Name. Like how there's like one of the official knights, but like he just like has no name and you never see his face. Maybe there's just this like.
The
there's just like a 5th member who's just like, yep, I am also part of this group. I just drive the blimp. So.
Yeah, they just went and found. They just got Iway out of the fog of lost
I was about to say they're weakened at Bernie and Iway in the ship.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, yeah, I definitely had that question too, so I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Yeah, the thing that pushed me away most, I think, I already mentioned. I just really didn't like how the Red Lotus just went after Tenzin. When I'm like, y'all clearly have him beat. Just capture. You don't need to destroy him. It's just like, that left me feeling like super grody. I didn't love it. But yeah.
Well, let's jump into our devotion. Element of water. What is something you're going to do in regards to life and the element of water that you want to focus on this week or this upcoming week, to just make life better?
Yeah,
take life, make it a little bit better.
I'm gonna
add a little spice.
A potentially overused but also always necessary answer to this.
Don't you do it.
I have been waking up in the middle of the night parched. And I haven't been I really have been thinking about it and reflecting on how I'm not drinking enough water, and I'm walking more and exercising more, and I think the same amount of water that I was doing before that means that I'm not allowed to live the way that I wanted to and not drink more water. So mine's a simple, but I think still impactful answer is that I'm going to focus on drinking more water. And I think that's really important for me right now. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on.
I need to support you in this. And so I'm really proud of you for picking that thing and doing that for yourself.
Oh, Sunshine, I'm so grateful for your support.
Totally don't think you phoned in that answer at all.
Listen, we all had the same amount of time to think, and this is what I came up with.
You're doing so good. I'm proud of you.
I appreciate your judgment. Trevor! What's an intention that you want to set?
Yeah, so I guess I'm not very good at change, but I know like water is, and it's able to change direction pretty well. I've been going through a lot of life changes lately, which I won't get into, mainly because we don't have the time, just like in my own life and stuff. and there's a sense where I'm just realizing, wow, so this is what life is about. This is what everybody's been talking about, all these changes. And so,
Yeah.
just being able to be more like water, be a little more fluid and ability to like go with the changing currents, even if it's, not where I expect it.
I think that's super important. Yeah, you got to go where life
Exactly.
takes you, right?
You just you're sitting on the tube and you're along for the ride.
and we resist by we're gonna hold on to this rock.
And sure,
No!
there may
No!
be some rapids and maybe even a waterfall, but you'll probably survive.
Yeah,
I've lifeguarded enough lazy rivers to see a variation of that happen before. No, stop the river!
Stop the river!
I can't do that.
Turn it off!
I can't do that.
Turn it off!
As much as we would like to.
Oh wow.
I think mine was kind of written for me and is somewhat easy as we think about how water has the ability to be a place where community gathers, whether it's pools or lakes or oceans, the beach, or literal water cooler areas.
Water fountain talk.
For Ben as he's getting hydrated. And so one of the things I'm doing is me and my wedding party and fiance and friends, we're all going to the beach and having a weekend there. And so I think for me, just to be able to engage in that community is something that I have been missing recently, and I'm excited to get back to it. And so that's going to be mine. It's just to enjoy that moment and don't get sidetracked into work or anything else that might be there, and just really be allowed to embrace that moment in that place.
I really phoned it in for sure.
You did. Mine was thoughtful. Yours
super thoughtful.
Phoned in.
Yeah.
And gratitude. Who are we grateful for? Because it's not Ben right now.
Oh,
I'm always grateful for you, bud.
I'm
But
always
not in
grateful
this
for
episode because
you.
you weren't in it. So who are we grateful for? Trevor.
I'm grateful for, in addition to friends like Ben, just being in a good community and really just intentional place with a lot of great friends to build me up. So
I love it. So, is there a character on the show that you are like, this character deserves all the gratitude?
I mean, I feel like Milo always, like, regardless of situation, deserves the gratitude. I mean,
Laugh,
like
sure.
that. If
Right.
anything, the person that can make you laugh. I mean, that's especially in times that are going on. But I would probably say, I'd probably say Kai again. Because like also very, I like seeing redemption arcs. I like seeing growth arcs because they give me, it gives me hope for my own sake.
So
like my own self, I was like, oh wow, it is possible. Like I can self-improve.
Yeah. I love it. Sunshine, what about you? Who are you grateful for? Besides me.
Of course you. I think I want to go. With it's on the tip of my tongue. Who am I picking?
I don't know. You have to
I
tell
know.
us.
I'm thinking I had it and then I lost it and then I am
Landing on.
I think I'm going to land on Tenzin.
Yeah. Good answer.
It is. And we've talked a lot and he gets our gratitude in several episodes of Korra, but everything he is doing is for the benefit of his community.
Like it's very other-centered.
And
right?
I really love that.
Yeah.
And he's a pacifist.
Yeah. That's clearly trained.
And this is clearly one of those things where it's just like everything he could have done to avoid that was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
And then it was, now I need to stand up and do what I need to do. And I'm very grateful for Tenzin this episode.
Yeah.
And then poor Pema, who's just like, she didn't ask for any of this.
Nope, sure didn't.
4 airbending children and all of the past 3 years of conflict.
Yeah. I'm gonna go meta for mine. And by meta, I mean I'm just gonna choose multiple people. I briefly, since it was already mentioned, I just want to shout out to Bolin, who I'm very rarely grateful for.
Oh yeah, it's good to lift up. If you have a chance to be grateful for Bolin or Mako,
Yeah,
it's always good to jump on that opportunity. They don't come around very often.
You brought it up where Bolin like tried to talk his grandmother into like, hey, we gotta go. Here's why. Home is where the heart is. Home is where we are. And she's like, nah. And he's like, all right, fine. And he
Samwised her.
And I'm, this is a very like complex decision, but I think it's the right decision because it's prioritizing life over this building. And I'm just really grateful that he made that decision. My second one.
It also seems like Grandma's like actually pretty okay with living.
Yeah, she's like, it's our home now.
Jumps right in later on in the episode.
Very quickly is like, all right, just let me get the picture. But yeah, I just that is a tough place to be in, and I'm grateful that this is the choice that was made. The second thing is I want to be grateful for Boomy and Kaya in particular, who as soon as Tenzin said, "Y'all get out, Kaya, Boomy, help me take these two on." Some of the most powerful benders that we've seen to date in history,
in canon,
right? In canon,
yeah.
And Boomy, who's been bending for all of a month.
Like, are we really saying Boomy's the best student out of all those other airbenders?
That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, I understand not picking Jinora because
not wanting your own child,
wanting your child to fight the Red Lotus. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm just like, I just don't know if Boomy was.
And this man has like proven to be notoriously like bad at things.
Yeah, it's just. But I also the reason I'm grateful is he just no questions asked, steps up and is willing to fight way out of his league. And does a pretty decent job, all things considered, right? He clearly has combat experience, but in a very different capacity. And it's just really interesting to me that Kaya and Boomy are just so willing and so competent, right? Kaya in her own right is a waterbending master, and Boomy is just in this. Boomy's, I just don't get it. Like I'm curious. Maybe it was obviously a quick thought, but. I have questions, and I'm also grateful. That's okay. I'm done.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for a wonderful episode. Trevor, where can people find you? What is something they can
and tell us about some of the things you're working on.
What are you working on? What's the stuff that the people can do to get?
Yeah, so you can definitely find me on Twitter at Trev_Warren. I tweet a lot of snarky things, so please go on there and like them because it makes me want to keep doing them. And you can also, I do a lot of freelance video production and graphic design work, so you can actually learn more about that going to my website, Rabbit Hole Productions, which is therabbitholeprod.com. So would love to people to check that out, and if you got any projects, hit me up. I'll make y'all some cool cinematic videos or something.
Yeah. Trevor, if you tweeted us, we will retweet that.
Oh my God! Thank goodness. I only have like 300 followers on Twitter, so this. Do you think this will be my big break? I feel like this will be my breakthrough. If I retweet.
I sincerely hope it is. I don't think it will be.
and if you want, you can go follow BNB_pod so you can see that retweet of
everybody.
So BNB_pod wherever you are checking out our social medias, TikTok, Instagram,
and
Twitter,
a Patreon.
And we have a Patreon. If you want to join into our Patreon, as little as $1 a month could get you a free live episode, some bonus content, hang out with Ben and me a little bit more, if that is something you dare want to do. But y'all, Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed our conversation. I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
I'm Ben Pruitt.
And this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.